Welcome back to Flashbacks. I'm Tony from Comic Book Fans United, and today we're going to be breaking down the episode The Flash of Two Worlds. For starters, let's break down the new characters and locales, beginning with Patty Spivot. Now, in the comics, Patty's actually Barry's first girlfriend, and she's worked closely with the Central City Police Department. In the New 52, she was actually a member of the Central City Police, along with Barry Allen. They were both crime scene investigators, and they worked side by side. Ultimately, once she finds out that Barry's the Flash, they break up, mostly because she feels lied to. In the show, a lot of her personality traits from the comics seem to have transferred over, as well as giving her motivation that ties her back to Season 1, where her father was murdered by Mark Martin. Now, Mark is obviously still alive in the world of the CW shows, and he very likely will return again somewhere down the line, along with maybe more other rogues. But again, it's great to see Patty. I wish she had been in Season 1, but it's great to see her here now. Next up, we have Eddie Slick, better known as the Sand Demon. Now, I'll be honest, I had to do some digging on this one. Turns out, in the comics, Eddie is a very obscure Firestorm villain, only having about 4 appearances. And from what I could gather, he does have control over sand and can manipulate his body to change into sand. And I think that translates well into the show. It's a good visual villain to have, and it's a nice rogue to give to Jay Garrick from Earth 2. We get our first good look at Zoom in this episode. Now, it's a huge departure from the Hunter Zolomon look, and as I assumed, it's not really going to be Hunter Zolomon. I don't know who it really will be. What I do want to point out, though, is that his design is actually based on the Black Flash, the personification of death in the Speed Force. And essentially what that is it is like a Grim Reaper for speedsters in the DC universe. And he will always be chasing after all the speedsters, and if he eventually catches you, that's it, you're dead. We've seen him used quite often in the Wally West stories. There was a point where he actually came after Wally and instead got Linda. We've seen him used, I think, briefly with Barry. But it's such a cool design, and I really want to see what the costume looks like once he stops vibrating. And of course, I want to know who's under that full mask. In this episode, Professor Stein actually breaks down the concept of the DC multiverse pretty well, essentially saying that we are currently existing on Earth 1, and everything that we've known all our history has occurred on Earth 1. But parallel to that is another Earth, Earth 2, with its own unique history and its own unique heroes. Barry Allen and his friends could exist on that world, but in drastically different ways. And same goes for on Earth 3 and Earth 4, and ultimately there's an infinite number of Earths. Obviously this is ties to stories like Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, 52, all tremendous stories from the comics. But what's really interesting to note is that it seems as though all of these Earths have speedsters, and it looks like Zoom has a grudge against them. So I'm curious to see what other speedsters we're going to see. Now, I know we've seen Jesse Quick already confirmed on the internet, but I'm thinking that there's a good chance that we're going to see at least another 2 or 3, or at least fingers crossed that there is. Moving on to the key plot points of this episode, for starters, let's talk about how Jay Garrick has only been the Flash for 2 years on Earth 2, and during that entire stretch of time, he's been battling with Zoom. Also revealed in this episode is the fact that they kept his origin from the Golden Age comics intact, where he's a chemist and he was experimenting with heavy water, and because of fumes that were given off from the experiment, he passes out, and when he wakes, he has super speed. Something I really, though, am curious about is it seems as though that they're setting up a relationship or some kind of romance between Jay Garrick and Caitlin Snow. Obviously, she seems to have a thing for him. In the comics, Jay Garrick is actually married. He's married to Joan Williams, or Joan Garrick. And if we do get to go to Earth 2, I'd really like to see Joan. I actually think she's a great character, both as an old woman and as a very attractive young woman. She's such a perfect foil for Jay, and to not include her in the show, I think, would be a mistake. Picking up a plot thread from Season 1, we see that Cisco now, when he comes in direct contact with something not of this Earth, he gets flashes of that same person. He touches the sand from Sand Demon, and he sees where Sand Demon is. In the comics, I've mentioned this a few times, Vibe's powers being very difficult to describe and comprehend at times. But it looks like as though he's going to be the way they track down other metahumans from other worlds. And he's obviously going to be the person that's going to track down all these portals to other Earths that have opened up all over Central City. Now, you know I like breaking down when Barry uses a new power or knows a new way to harness his speed. And in this episode, they create a brand new ability for Barry that I have never seen before. Essentially, he's able to build up enough energy that he can throw lightning. And that's how he's able to defeat Speed Demon. And Jay Garrick teaches him this. Like I said, as far as I know, he's never done this in the comics, but I'm actually okay with it because in a weird sort of way it does make sense. It's like a static discharge. And last season we saw him use his powers as a defibrillator. So it's not that far of a leap to think that he could build up even more energy and then just discharge it as like a giant lightning bolt. Going back to last season once more, with the episode Man in the Yellow Suit, I had assumed that Joe was a widower. Turns out I was wrong. Unless, of course, this woman is from Earth 2, but I kind of doubt it. We'll see where this storyline progresses. Now let's talk about that ending real quick, where it shows us an establishing shot of what is clearly an alternate Earth's Central City. And in this Central City, we have a fully functional Star Labs that has been running since 1991. And this tour guide is leading this class of children through the lab, and you see what looks to be like the rocket that Superman came in as a baby. Obviously, I think that's just a nod to that style of rocket. I don't think it's going to be, that's what it's going to turn out to be, but it would be pretty cool. But the real kicker is that an elevator opens and out comes Tom Cavanaugh as Harrison Wells. And this is clearly bait for the next episode to see where that storyline progresses. I don't think that's Eobard Thawne. I think that is an alternate Earth Harrison Wells. But it's possible. It's possible it's Thawne because at the end of the first season when the helmet comes through the singularity, well, Jay's helmet comes through the singularity, it was clearly obvious that Thawne recognized it and was a little shaken up by it. So I don't know what to think about that ending yet, and I'm not one to really speculate too much on this show. But it's something I will be talking about in the weeks to come. Alright, now moving on to my favorite flashbacks from this episode, let's start with the fact that DC clearly has a thing for chalkboards with mathematical equations or crazy theories and speculation just to build up kinds of mysteries. In this episode we see Professor Stein working out how travel works between worlds. The most famous chalkboards in the DC universe belong to Rip Hunter, the son of Booster Gold, who we will be seeing in Legends of Tomorrow. I just thought it was a clever thing to just hide in there. It's something that I expect from DC at this point. Here's a quick one. During the interrogation scene of Eddie Slick, Barry and Patty are talking back and forth about how to break down Joe, and Patty actually compares him to the Bridge Keeper of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's actually a very funny scene, one of my favorite movies, and I just thought it was a cool little inclusion for this bit of dialogue. When San Dimas kidnaps Patty Spivot, he's actually holding her at the Woodrue greenhouse. Woodrue is actually a name of a character in the DC universe. He's a villain. Prior to the New 52, he was known as the Floronic Man. He's very much like Swamp Thing, and in the New 52, Scott Snyder used him as the Cedar. He was basically a rival to Swamp Thing, someone who was trying to take the power of the Green for himself and try to become the new avatar of the Green. So to tie him into a greenhouse is an obvious one, but it was something very cool to catch. When we finally get to the team up between Barry and Jay, Jay tells him that the helmet he wears was his father's during the War of the Americas. Clearly something that is different in his own personal history from his own Earth. And this is a common thing in the multiverse in the DC universe. Well, one example that I can think of right now off the top of my head is an Earth where the Allied powers lost World War II, and the Axis powers took over, and then there was a group of freedom fighters that had to basically try to fight back and take back America. So to throw out a general term like War of the Americas, that was the first thing that came to mind. I highly doubt that's what it is, But again, it's there to give you an idea of how different the worlds that they grew up in are. Much how, like on this Earth, Barry is referred to as the Scarlet Speedster, Jay reveals that from where he comes from, he's called the Crimson Comet. And what has to be one of the coolest moments in this entire series so far is the recreation of the cover from The Flash of Two Worlds, where you have Barry and Jay meet for the first time. They recreate the cover, this time though replacing the man in the foreground with Patty Spivot. But overall, it was a great moment for the series, and it's just something great for longtime Flash fans to see. Lastly, we have another mention of the number 52. This time, the number of portals that have opened up since the Singularity. There's 52 portals that have opened up in Central City, the largest being within Star Labs itself. What's interesting to note, though, is that when Stein is telling them about this, he says that these open up wormholes into both time and space. And that got me thinking, we have time-traveling characters coming up soon in Legends of Tomorrow in both Rip Hunter and, to a degree, I guess you could say Vandal Savage. We don't know how he's going to be introduced yet, if he's going to be an immortal. I think he will be from the context clues that we've got from that teaser, but to basically say time travel like that, and given that the show's already dabbled a little bit in time travel before, I'm really excited to see where that really goes. Overall, this was an excellent episode, a huge step up from last week's. I'm not saying last week's was a disappointment, but it was fairly rudimentary. This one, though, expands on Earth 2 and Jay Garrick. It gave us our first look at Zoom. We got Patty Spivot in this episode. We've got all these plot threads that are established in this episode with the return of Harrison Wells and Joe's wife. There's so much to really to build upon. But the thing I'm most excited for, as I was last week, is the multiverse, because there is a literal infinite number of storylines that can span out from this. Alright, that wraps it up for this huge episode of Flashbacks. As always, I'd like to hear from you guys, so sound off in the comments below. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, share the links. It goes a long way at helping us grow. Also, come check us out at geekade.com, where you can find Flashbacks, our Sunday podcast, which I work on, our reviews from the shop. You can find Between Two Beards on there, Tiger Driver 91, episodes, paper cuts, Why I Love Wrestling, Ring the Bell. So much great content from so many great people. It's a great site. Go check it out. Also, before I go, I'd like to bring up the fact that next Thursday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. at Manifest Comics right here in Bayonne, New Jersey, we will be having our second annual art show dedicated to the memory of Wendy Eisman, a dear friend we lost just recently. We'll be raising money for Autism Speaks, and we will be auctioning off original art as well as art prints from both high-profile artists in the comic industry as well as local artists that we feel do tremendous work. So come on down, come check out the great art, give a few dollars for a great cause, and hang out with the admins of CBFU. Alright guys, as always, I will see you next week with the next episode. Bye.